The Buffalo Bills are set to face off against the Denver Broncos next weekend in Buffalo for the Super Wildcard playoff round. We're going to discuss that, the loss to the Patriots, the firings and drama in the AFC East, and much more. Let's go!
To my friend Nate and all the listeners of this podcast, no one circles the wagons than Nate Discate. Circle the wagons, Buffalo.
Where else would you rather be than right? Let's go, Buffalo. Hey, let's go, Buffalo. Make me wanna.
What's going on, Bills Mafia? Welcome to another episode of Circling the Wagons, a Buffalo fan base podcast. I am your host, Nate, guys. Thank you so much. We are going to discuss everything I just mentioned, the Broncos, the Bills playing the Broncos this next Sunday. We're going to talk about the Bills' loss to the Patriots. Obviously, a meaningless game, didn't matter. And we're going to talk about Gerard Mayo getting fired. We're going to talk about the Patriots draft order as a result of that. We're going to talk about Tyreek Hill's comments and also do a quick preview of the playoff game against the Denver Broncos. Going to discuss all these things and more. I'd like to welcome my co-host this episode, John. John, what is up, brother? How are you feeling, man?
Pretty great. This is the year. Let's go.
Dude, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this postseason. I think more so. So I put this poll up on Twitter where I said, how do you feel about this postseason compared to other Bills postseasons, in recent memory, and where do you stack them? Do you feel more confident? Do you feel as confident as last year or years before? Or do you feel less confident in the Bills going into this next postseason? They have the second seed. They're at home up until the AFC Championship game, unless they play against the Chiefs, so they have home field advantage for at least 2 games if they win. John, how do you feel? What's your confidence level going into the Super Wildcard playoff round?
I'm super confident. I'm always super confident until they lose, right? I'm as confident as I've been since the 2021 season, I think.
The 2021 season, was that the 13 seconds game?
I think so, right? 2021.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, that season, I think I feel as confident as I did that season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'll share my screen in a second and show the results, but everyone's kind of in that same boat, I feel, and that's the way I feel too. It's like, I said, how confident do you feel about the Bills in this postseason? And 50%, almost 50% said they're more confident than ever. I'm headed into this postseason. About 12% are less confident, and 39% are the same as last year. So basically, 85% feel as good as last year, the year before, or better, which I think is a good sign, because I think there's a number of reasons why Bills Mafia is feeling this way. I think first and foremost has to do with Josh Allen and the way he's playing. At an MVP level, the offense is humming, and a lot of factors go into that. I mean, they've put up the second most points in the NFL, the most points in a season in franchise history. Like I mentioned, Josh Allen is playing at an MVP-like level. He has the greatest EPA per play of all quarterbacks, including Lamar Jackson. The Bills' offense and defense, for the most part, is pretty darn healthy, minus Terrell Bernard missing some practice last week, but then practicing on a limited basis. I think they kept him out of this last game just as a precaution, just because he's a starter. But I think he starts against the Broncos. There's a lot of things to be excited about. And I think first off, it starts with Josh. And then second off, it starts with injuries and lack thereof.
Just Josh, but how well balanced the offense is. That they just broke the record. First team in NFL history, 30 rushing touchdowns, 30 passing touchdowns this season.
That's crazy. That's incredible. This is such a well-balanced team. I'm glad you brought up that point, John, because Josh Allen could have an MVP level season without a 1,000-yard receiver and with just barely a 1,000-yard running back. I know James Cook technically got 1,000 yards this last week, but I mean, Josh didn't even play more than a snap. So yeah, he didn't play with a 1,000-yard running back, but they did have a running back that had 1,009 yards. But I mean, they didn't have an 1,800-yard, Saquon Barkley or whatever, or 2,000-yard Saquon Barkley. They didn't have, a Jamar Chase on this roster. Like, he's doing it. They can beat you in multiple different ways. And the beauty of it is they're all healthy for those ways. So, John, if you were going to, are there any other positives that you look at going into the postseason besides the ones I just described before I go into like some I don't want to say negatives, but some not so hugely positive, factors.
Why don't you go ahead? I'll play off of whatever you may or may not say.
I don't want to say negative, but so I mean, again, the Bills are at home, 8-0 at home this season, so that's a huge positive. One thing that's not as big of a positive is obviously the Bills' defense compared to previous seasons. The Bills' defense is kind of underperforming. They're not a bad defense by any means. They're an average defense by most metrics. So they're not bad. They're not great. And they've suffered a lot of injuries this season. So I guess that's one of the main reasons why I'm optimistic, is because the injuries, specifically on that side of the ball, is a lot less than what we've seen in previous. I mean, think about the Bills Chiefs game last season in the divisional round in Buffalo. They lose by 2 points, and they were missing Christian Benford. They were missing Terrell Bernard. They were missing, I think Taron Johnson was out too. Either that or he was banged up. Rasul Douglas was banged up. They were missing Matt Milano. They had AJ Klein off the couch, right? Like, I mean, Balin Spector was starting. That was a rough bunch, and they still came within 2 points of beating the Chiefs, who later went on to win the Super Bowl. And that's all with Josh Allen having, Stephon Diggs, who had one catch for 8 yards that game. It's just, I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited. The defense isn't as good as I'd say it's been in previous years, but I still think that they can turn it on when they need to.
Yeah, I mean, one of my wall shames for this game would have been the safety play, especially considering the starters played a fair amount of the game. So yeah, I agree with you. They let up 40 points a few games. Obviously, it's really good offenses, but you gotta buckle down a little bit more. They lost a lot of guys last year. I still trust the scheme though, and I think in general, look at the turnover ratio. It's incredible.
Best in the NFL.
Yeah, not only is everybody's talking about Josh Allen turning the ball over less than a regular season, which he's been fine at in the playoffs. Like, everybody's like, oh, it'll choke Josh Allen playoffs, but he's never been because of Josh Allen in playoffs. But the defense, how many games they created turnovers this year, they're very opportunistic. And like you said, that was going to be one of my points. They're very healthy. And like you said, Bernard, it was the only one that probably wouldn't have played this game. They could be 100% healthy going into the playoffs, potentially, and that's really 50% of the battle when you get to the time of the year.
It has been for the Bills, at least as of late. And then I'm glad you brought the turnover differential, because they are better than the next team in the NFL by 8 turnovers. So that not only takes into account the defense's ability to turn the ball over for the Bills, but also the offense's lack of turning the ball over to the other team. So Josh Allen doing the best in his career at limiting turnovers, right? But then you think about the defense, and they're tied for turnovers in stats of, I mean, they lead it in stats of turning the ball over on their side. I think they're tied for the league lead of actually creating turnovers. So doing a great job on both sides for the Buffalo Bills, and that could be huge. They have to continue that. I'm glad you said that, John, because sure, they may be a little bit more bend than break. They might have some issues on 3rd and long, as we've seen throughout the season at times. But when it comes down to it, at least during the regular season, they've been able to create turnovers and get the ball back to Josh Allen. So I think that's something that the Bills fans should be excited about, at least optimistic about going into the playoffs. So, John, you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned safety play, because that is a good place to start for talking about the Bills-Patriots game. The Bills lost 23-16. It didn't matter. Both teams were essentially, well, I'd say the Bills definitely more than the Patriots were playing their backups. It seemed as though the Patriots, for the most part, were playing everyone but Drake May, I believe. I don't know. It was one of those games where I honestly didn't pay super attention to. I know you took a lot better notes than me this time, and I'm glad you did, because we're going to talk about that. But I'm glad you brought up the safety play, because here you have 6th-round rookie Joe Milton carving up part of the Bills secondary, and in specifically the safeties, Hamlin and Rapp, the Bills starting safety. I mean, this isn't a backup pair. These are the Bills safeties, and he made them look pretty average. Now you have to hope as a Bills fan that was just, well, they didn't want they wanted them to get some playing time, but they didn't want them to go 110%, right? Like they just enough just to be out there, but not enough to potentially get injured, right? Because I agree with you, they didn't look good, and I thought Joe Milton looked pretty good, and one of the reasons why is because of those guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe attribute it to some of like the rest of the defense was back up, so like to communicate with the linebackers, the defensive backs, maybe, but like should have been a little bit more intuition on some of those plays. I feel like. Also, I don't want to. I really don't want to bring this up, but I have to because it's related. But Milton was a 6th-round rookie this year who did attend Michigan. I don't want.
Why did you even say that out loud?
Maybe there's gonna be a quarterback controversy between him and Drake May at some point in the future. I don't know, but just throwing that out there.
I know. It's funny. I was on a Patriots podcast this last weekend, which was a lot of fun. It was on the Patriots Focus podcast, and we talked about that game. This game, and there wasn't much for me to preview because it's like, well, the Bills are going to be putting in a lot of backup, so I'll be watching a few things. But we talked about, he was like, I was asking him, I was like, do you want the Patriots to win or not? And he said, well, I'm interested to see how Joe Milton does because there are some flashes in training camp, and maybe we can get rid of Jacoby Brissett as a backup and use him as a backup. And I look at this game, and mind you, small sample size against backups. But to me, if I'm going to spend another $10 million or $8 million on a Jacoby Brissett or start,
Bad. Brissett's pretty bad. I would go with May and Milton.
May and Milton, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. So what's odd is I know it's projecting way too far, but they might have 2 solid quarterbacks. They might have Drake May. He did look pretty good against the Bills. I know we're going to talk about rookie quarterbacks a little bit later on when we talk about the Broncos, but I thought Drake May looked better than I thought he would, especially with the Bills' track record against rookie quarterbacks. There were some throws he made that looked really good against a good Bills defensive backs, not just the safeties we were talking about, but other corners that he had some really good throws to. So it'll be interesting to see how that team goes. The Patriots, John, how much did you love the fact that the Bills let the Patriots win that one? I was kind of hoping that they would.
It was a really weird game because I felt I didn't know who to root for. Because like by default, it's like, oh yeah, go Bills, and it's like, oh, they make a great play. Oh yeah, great. Oh, that player was great. But at the same time, when the Patriots made a play, you're like, oh no, well, yeah, I guess that was good.
You're okay with it. The Patriots would score, and my son would be like, oh man, the Patriots scored. I'd be like, it's all right, it's all right. This is the one game besides the preseason where you're like, doesn't matter. In fact, so I brought it up on Twitter. I said, hey, I'm not really upset if the Bills lose this one because it'd be nice to win 14 games for the first time in franchise history. But if you take away the first overall pick for the Patriots, that's not the worst thing in the world, right?
Make it the number 4 overall pick. And even if they're not going for a quarterback with it, the number 1 spot, they could trade down. Like they have all these other opportunities. Now it's like, a little bit different.
Exactly. Even though you're not, maybe you get the best wide receiver in the draft, right? You get that, but now you might not get that.
They'll probably pick an offensive lineman, I'm gonna say.
It'll be interesting to see.
It's early, but yeah,
it's early.
It definitely changes things a lot.
Oh yeah,
and you wonder why. So Jared Mayo got fired, right? So did he pull a Lovie Smith? Did he know like ahead of time? Like, we're gonna do this. I think coaching aside, the players are still gonna play. These guys are playing for, even if you're coming in as a backup, like Joe Milton, slinging it all the way around the best he can, running around. He's playing for his next job if he doesn't stay in New England, just like everybody else on that team, including Jared Mayo. Like you have to play for that. So, like a lot of people are talking about these things the last week or two of the season for a lot of these teams, and it's like you can't force guys to like take a loss. They're gonna play their hardest because they're gonna play for the next contract.
No, there are things though that you could tactically do as a coach to lessen your chances, like Sean McDermott punting it from the Patriots 37. Is that what he did? Something like that. some
Well,
ridiculous.
that was for an incentive-based thing for Sam Martin. If you got another inside the 20 punt, so just to skip ahead here,
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna put Sean McDermott on the Wall of Fame because he let Allen start and get that consecutive start streak. Von Miller is playing on the first series of the game, gets his incentive sack.
Mhm.
He what was it? Oh, James Cook. He ties like he keeps putting Cook in. He not only does he get 1,000 yards, he ties the OJ record for rushing touchdowns in a season. And then Sam Martin, where it's like, I was even like not thinking about it at the time. I was like, oh, why aren't they kicking a 53-yard field goal like Basket used to practice? It's like, oh yeah, that's right. Like Sam Martin, one more inside the 20, he gets an incentive. So
Yeah.
my wall of fame was going to be McDermott for allowing those players to do that and doing it in a way such that it didn't put those players at risk. Nobody got hurt. Like, I mean, you're kicker and punter. I mean, you're not going to interchange those out anyway, but I just thought it was done well. And I think the players would really appreciate that.
Yeah, if you look at those things, all those things you mentioned, and think players around the league don't see that and be like, "That's really cool that they did that." I mean, Sean McDermott is a player's coach, like to that level that he wants to see them succeed monetarily, not just on the field, not just wins, but he wants them to make what was it, Vaughn? Vaughn either made another million or $1.5 million from getting that sack, right? Like you said, Sam Martin, I think it was like a $250,000 incentive, which isn't a ton of money compared to Vaughn's, but at the same time, if you're a punter and you're making $3 million, that's like, what, it's a tenth of your salary in one punt, right? Like, how important is that? I'm so glad you brought him up as the Wall of Fame, because that is such a good person to put on the Wall of Fame because of all those things. I think players in the NFL see that and they appreciate it, especially, John, when you consider the exact opposite with Jerry Jones and the Cowboys and the drama surrounding that of him starting Trey Lance over Cooper Rush, because if Cooper Rush played another game's worth of snaps, and he gets a $500,000 bonus for making 55% of the snaps of the season, right? And so that's why Jerry Jones decided not to start Cooper Rush instead of Trey Lance. And of course he denied it. Oh, I wouldn't even know about that. Oh, okay, Jerry. That sounds like some scumbag thing that he might do.
I didn't even think about that. I thought about like, oh, well, Trey Lance was at one point, he's a first round pick at one point. So, you got to see what he can do. But I didn't even think about the incentive for Cooper Rush.
Yeah, that was some potential alleged drama about what had happened with them deciding to start, supposedly, allegedly. Times like this, I am so glad, as the Pagulas get a lot of crap. I know we give them some hell too on the podcast from time to time, but you can't say that they are meddling owners to the point of like Jerry Jones, where Jerry Jones is like, I'm going to be GM till I die. This wasn't supposed to be, a hobby for me or just something I own. This is my career, right? And you're like, oh my God. And everyone in Dallas, all Cowboys fans are just saying, oh my gosh, please just give it up, sell the team or just, stop being the GM for God's sake, right? So I'm glad you said Sean McDermott on the Wall of Fame. That was a really good one. I didn't have a lot of notes from this game, to be honest. I was just kind of watching it from the side. I did say, though, when I wanted the Patriots to lose, there were just a couple on social media. There's just some folks on Twitter or wherever that just want to get under your skin. And so their point was, oh, that's a loser mentality. That's so soft that you'd want to lose to the Patriots, that's the reason why you would lose in the playoffs, because of that mentality. I'm like, are you stupid? I'm not saying that it's the only way to play the game.
We're not saying anybody's stupid.
Oh, that person is that one person I'm talking about on Twitter. But yeah,
I totally understand it, because like a few years ago, they when they swept the AFC East, you want them to do it again, right? Sweep the AFC East. It's a big deal. Like, it's a big stat, but to come out healthy, and the other part of it for me is these depth players and rookies and guys who don't get a lot of time during the season got a lot of time today. So if somebody does go down during the playoffs, they have recent games where they were involved and like can reflect on it and build on that. Like, if they're coming in cold in the AFC Championship game because so and so went down and you're the third guy in, it's not as easy. Now you get more experience. Every time you get more plays, you get more experience. And I think that, like, they didn't get the bye week, but they got a pseudo bye week where nobody got injured and a lot of the depth players got a lot of extra time, and that could benefit them because of that.
I think it absolutely benefited them. I think the person was making the point that even though you're playing with backups, you still want to try as hard to win as possible, to the point where I was saying, well, not if it doesn't help you to win whatsoever. I mean, you don't get a better seeding because of it. You have nothing to gain, but the other team has something to lose by you losing. I think that's playing to the advantage of the way that the rules are, right? Like I think that's playing chess instead of checkers. Checkers would say, oh, just win. You win every game. But chess is saying, well, that might be the difference between the best wide receiver in the draft for Drake May or like an okay one or something, like I can't think of a wide receiver that I don't know. I can't think of a wide receiver that flamed out all of a sudden, but Sammy Watson, Sammy Watkins.
Plus, you want to see what you got. Like the earlier in the game, it was 3rd and short, and they did a QB sneak with Trubisky, and then it was 4th and there's some sort of review, 4th and inches. They do it again, and it didn't work, right? But then now they can go back and reevaluate. Was it because of Trubisky, or was it because of one of the particular offensive linemen, or like what happened there? And now they can decide if like one of those two players are in the future, what they're going to do. Like little things like that, like they can go back and look at it. So I'm totally okay with all that stuff. No, I think it's good.
Yeah. Do you have any other? I mean, do you have a Sweet Sassy Molassie play of the game or anything for this one?
Yeah, it was that 48-yard touchdown pass, Joe Milton to Keyshawn Boutte. That was fantastic. I thought it was awesome. That broke the game wide open for the Patriots to not get the number one. I mean, I know the Bills pulled ahead and everything a little, after that, but the Pats scored 3 field goals later on. But yeah, no, that looked pretty good to me. I thought that was also part of my reasoning for the wall of shame was because the safeties were all over the place on that play. Other plays also, but that was the highlight reel for against our safety. So they need to look into that.
I think going back to, I'm glad you brought out the safeties again, because the more I think about it, the more we talk about it. I'm not as worried about that because that they kind of treated this like a preseason game. It was probably a very vanilla defense from the standpoint of they weren't trying to mix up coverages for Joe Milton, so he didn't know who was going to drop back and who was going into zone. They weren't doing crazy blitzes. And I mean, honestly, like, why would you do that with these backups? Like you said, these guys are fighting to get experience. And why would you give them experience by giving them intricate plays as opposed to, okay, this is a play where you're going to cover the tight end, or this is a play where you're going to shoot the gap and take down the running back. Like, you don't want to put too much on a plate of a backup when this is their first time playing. You just want them to get the experience of being in the game and playing. Sure, maybe they threw in, a middle linebacker blitz or something for Dorian Williams or, something else. But this is not the time to throw in like, hey, half of you are going to go to man and the rest of you are going to do cover 2. Like, this is not you're going to fake pressure and then drop back. Like, this isn't the game for that. And I don't think you saw a lot of that. Like, I don't remember seeing a ton of that for the Bills. Like, oh, this is a really intricate look. All 9 guys are on the defensive line. Like, no, this was like a preseason game almost, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it really was, yeah.
So yeah, but agreed. Like, it would have been nice to see them play better, but I guess I'm not as worried because a lot of the season you didn't see, DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp miss a lot of plays.
Even the tackling and stuff wasn't the best.
Yeah, true.
So it's like
the health. I'm glad you brought that up first because the health is so important going into the playoff game that I don't even care if they try to tackle that hard going into this because they know how to tackle. They will be giving 110% against the Broncos. It's not like they're going to leave anything out there. So it's not an effort issue that I'm worried about. It's more health by far. And for all intents and purposes, they have it.
So here's a question for you regarding effort. The Bills are the 3rd AFC game of the weekend. So they will know if they win who they will play the following week. Will that affect how they play against the Broncos, or will they look ahead? Coaching or players, both, neither.
I guess what would it matter, because you need to get through this week. Would you look at that game and say, "Oh, like I'm excited because I get to play so and so," or would you say, "Oh, this is it's gonna be a rough
We
one
got
next week"?
we got to play
Play is good.
Baltimore next week. We got to play Baltimore next week. You got to buckle down next week and play Baltimore. But they're not even thinking about Denver, like that kind of thing.
I mean, I'd like to believe them when they say they're just focusing on going 1-0 this week, and I think 90% of them will be. But yeah, I think they're absolutely going to look at Baltimore. But at the same time, I don't think they look at Baltimore and be like, "Oh man, we got to play them again." I think this Bills team, maybe not every Bills team is like this, but maybe it has been. It will be this year, and maybe it has been in the recent past. But they're going to want that game. I think they want to play Baltimore. I think they want to prove that that was a one-off, because the Bills lost 3-4 games, I guess, this season, if you count the Patriots one. I don't really count that one. So 3 games this season. 2 of them were by a total, point differential of 5 points for those 2 games, 2 losses. And then the big one was against the Ravens, where they lost by 25 points. So I think they want that game back. I think they want to prove that they can win. And they were down players in that game too. They lost where they were without Bernard and Milano in that one. Shakir was out in that game. There were some players out. I think Von Miller was on suspension. Spencer Brown might have missed that game. I mean, it was a rough game for the Bills.
When do they announce MVP? Is it like just before the Super Bowl or earlier than that?
I think it's just before the Super Bowl.
Because it'd be better if it was like this week, and they or just after this week, and they're like, "Oh, it's Lamar Jackson," and like Josh Allen gets really pissed.
I know, right? That would be great.
Touchdowns. No, something crazy.
Thursday, February 8th, right before the Super Bowl.
Oh, okay. It was too late by then.
They want to see how they perform in the playoffs. So I think that's fair.
Well, most valuable player doesn't have to be a guy who's in the playoffs, right?
True. Technically, they don't.
But it's gonna be.
What's funny is I think that the Lamar Josh Allen MVP debate is very heated with Ravens fans and Bills fans, of course. And what's interesting is everyone will point to the stats, which there's a ton of great stats for Lamar.
What the stats last year?
Exactly. That's a great point, because stats didn't matter last year. He was on the best team, and he was the major reason why that they were winning, right? So it proved he was the most valuable player on one of the best teams. Everyone was showing
Allen should have won it at least twice already, honestly.
It's funny because the Ravens were the number 1 seed last year, and the Bills were what, the 4th seed, 3rd seed, maybe some 2nd seed. No, they were the 2nd seed, right? Yeah, they were.
Yeah, they ran the table, won the division, and got the 2nd seed.
With the 2nd seed, that's right. So they were right there. But it was Josh Allen had everything except he had more turnovers than Lamar did. Otherwise, I think he beat him in all stats. And then, now that Ravens fans are seeing Lamar Jackson put up insane stats, and they're like, well, if he won the MVP last year and he had crappy stats, well, then he should win the MVP this year, because his stats are, record setting, which, to that point, it makes sense. But as we've been told before, record matters. It's one of the main determining factors, and the Bills have a better record. I mean, everyone saw that cool, fadeaway pass or whatever he did, no-look pass in the end zone for a touchdown against the Browns. It's like Josh Allen didn't even have to play that game because the Bills had already secured the number 2 seed, right?
How many quarters has Josh Allen missed this year because they put in the backup?
So I looked at that today. I looked at that stat today because you're right, because of how many less plays, because the Bills have been ahead by so many points. Josh Allen has played 60 less snaps than Lamar Jackson has. So, I mean, if you put that into the context, what is that?
How many games?
A game and a half. I want to say it was 1,000 snaps in 17 games, divided by 17. So 58 plays per game by that metric.
Okay.
So it's a game. It's a whole game that Josh Allen didn't play that Lamar Jackson had to, which was essentially this last game. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. The Ravens defense is amazing, but if you're going to give Lamar Jackson the MVP last year when he was pretty much the entire offense, this year he's not. He's got Derrick Henry. What does Derrick Henry have? 1,800 yards rushing?
He was in the conversation for MVP.
I mean, how do you? Josh Allen has what? Like, he doesn't have a Derrick Henry. He doesn't have a Jamar Chase. He doesn't have a Saquon Barkley.
He definitely doesn't have a Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
He's got a good running back, but he does not have one of those receivers.
No, he doesn't. But you could argue though, the way that the Bean has put this roster together, they have one of the best running back rooms that they've ever had. They've had one of
You know what? You know who the MVP should be? Deion Dawkins.
for protecting Josh Allen.
Deion Dawkins should be the MVP.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think? Is that a hot take?
That's so hot, John. I think Deion Dawkins is a great player. I think the whole offensive line in general, to that point, like I agree, Deion Dawkins being the most prominent member of that offensive line, but I think the offensive line deserves the MVP as much as Josh Allen in that regard. So I agree with
I'm just trying to get away from the whole quarterback narrative, and then even beyond the running back narrative, right? Like the last time a defensive player won the award was Lawrence Taylor in the '86. Like that's dumb. Like you can't tell me there wasn't a defensive player worthy of the award between now and 1986.
Yeah.
It's just a quarterback's award now. Well, why don't they just call it that?
Yeah. What was the last time running back won it? I think it was 2008 with Adrian Peterson, I want to say. So anyway, not that I wanted to get into the MVP discussion because honestly, it doesn't matter. Josh Allen could not win the MVP and the Bills win the Super Bowl, and I could care less about the MVP. We're just looking to, I think it's more of Bills Mafia just wanting Josh Allen to get that respect that we think he deserves.
He does. He deserves
it. Which he does. Which even if he doesn't get the MVP, I mean, Josh Allen is still viewed by the entire NFL as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So does it really matter? We would love him to get the accolades because he hasn't really gotten anything to prove for it besides millions and millions of dollars in ads and all that stuff. So, but we'd like him to just get the notoriety for getting something like that. So, John, anything else about the Patriots game before we start talking about AFC East drama?
Tied OJ for rushing touchdowns in a season. I'm just kind of going over my notes. I'm sorry.
No, this is great podcasting. This is amazing. This is everyone wants to hear this. It's okay.
Like I'm a little prepared. I have notes. It's just that I haven't looked at it since yesterday.
I'm gonna drink my hot chocolate and give the folks some ASMR while you do that.
No, that's good. Hey, about that Jamarcus Ingram play to help Sam Martin get that incentive on the.
Oh yeah, what a great play on special teams.
That was huge.
That's what she said. So
you should take him out to dinner for that one.
I know, right? Yeah, that's a great play. You're right, because that doesn't happen because what he put it down at like the 1 yard line. Jamarcus Ingram ran into the end zone and batted it back. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, hey, and Tyler Bass, did he miss an extra point?
Yeah. I mean, he got a 49-yard field goal too. So it's, didn't like in the Dolphins game where he kicked that 61-yarder or whatever it was. Did he miss an extra point that game too?
I think.
Yeah, he did. Remember, I was there. Yeah, he missed an extra point, and then like later on in the game, it's like 60-something yard field goal to win the game. We're like, oh, well, this is dumb. Then he made it.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I know. I'm just hoping that he doesn't biff it in the most important stage ever this season. Right. So
I do think their biggest vulnerability across the whole team is special teams, and not pinning it on Bass, although that could be part of it. But the coverage units aren't the best still. The only bright spot I think is Codrington, and when Bass does make his kicks. But like I think everything else is very suspect. I mean, that black punt in the Rams game, they should have won that game if it wasn't for that. So I'm worried about that going forward. If I had to pick one thing, like for the Bills to lose a game in the playoffs, it'd be special teams play.
Yeah, I like that one. I mean, I don't like it, but I like the point that you've made. I don't like the fact that the special teams for the Bills is sus. I don't like that. Not a fan.
But it's been like that for a long time. Would you rather go back to when during the drought where the special teams was the only thing to write home about and the offense and defense sucked? Probably not, right?
No, absolutely.
It's better now. It's just not ideal.
Having been on both sides of that argument, I'd absolutely say this is the best. We're actually talking about. I mean, remember in the drought, it's funny. I went on another podcast in our network too. Did 2 podcast spots. Nate's moving up in the world, and asked twice in 1 week, and it was with Nickel City Crew on the Buffalo Fan Base Podcast Network also, and we were talking about drought scars. He termed it. He coined it drought scars, and that's a good way of putting it because, I mean, just think about, how early in this season we'd be thinking about the draft. Like what, November? We'd be talking about who's the best next quarterback in the draft, or who could the Bills look forward to drafting for their defensive line or offensive line or running back or whatever. Like, we don't even think about the draft. I don't even know who the top prospects are. I don't care. Too busy focusing on this season still. It's a good place to be, man. It's so much better. So yeah, even though I love Brian Moorman and I love the special teams at that time, that's okay. That's okay. Who was the special?
When your punter is the best player in your team, that's a problem.
Who was the special teams coordinator at that time for the Bills? You remember he was good. I cannot remember him, but I remember liking him and wishing that he was the interim head coach every time they fired a head coach. Bobby April? Is that who it was?
Yeah, Bobby April. Yeah.
If there was any way, and I don't even know if he's still coaching, I think he is. If there was any way to bring Bobby April back to the Bills when they eventually fire Matthew Smiley, because I know it's coming either this season or the next season, please bring up Bobby April back if he's not retired, please. Anyway, let's see. Okay, so going on to the Bills facing the Broncos this next Sunday at 1 p.m. John, what do you think the spread is on the Bills Broncos game? It's in Buffalo. Bills starting against, by the way, Bo Nix, even though he's a rookie quarterback, he's had a hell of a second part of the season. I read somewhere that he had the second best rookie season for touchdowns thrown in a season. I mean, he's not bad. He's really not. I think there's a lot for Broncos fans to be excited about, and he's gotten better as the season's gone on. But still, the Bills are favored. How much do you think they're favored by?
I was thinking about this. Offense, defensively. The Broncos, I think they might have the most sacks in the league, right?
The Broncos are the best. Yes, they have the most sacks in the NFL.
And the Bills are, Josh Allen's one of the least sack quarterbacks. Like, he's only had
I'll say it's 14 or something like that.
Yeah, 14 sacks. That seems balanced. Bills run game. So
here, if you're going to use, no, I want you to take a look at this chart then. If we're going to go into starting to talk about the breakdown so that you can decide what the spread you think is, the Denver Broncos on defense have the best EPA per play of any team in the NFL. The best EPA on defense of any team in the NFL. They have a really good defense. When it comes to the pass, they are the best in the NFL when it comes to pass coverage. And running the ball, they're sixth. Or no, I'm sorry, that's the Bills. They're sixth. The Broncos are fourth in the NFL.
Wait, go back to the last one. What was the last one?
This is per pass. The Broncos are the best in the NFL when it comes to the pass. As you can see, the Bills.
Wait. Who are they going to cover?
Oh, yeah. Who can you?
Everybody eats. Doesn't matter. There's no digs. You don't have to force feed somebody. Not worried about that one. All right, go on.
Yep. EPA per rush, which people, if you don't know what EPA stands for expected points added per play. So, John, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of EPA. Do you know what EPA is, essentially, as to why I'm just using this metric?
Yeah, I mean, you can use any metric, but
it's like saying it's basically putting everything on a scale, right? So expected points added is saying, like, let's say you have a 5-yard run, but the play was, it was like 3rd and 15, right? So you didn't get the first down, but it's a 5-yard run and it was 3rd and 4. That 5-yard run means a lot more, right? So that's kind of like the weighted why EPA matters and why it should be taken into account, depending on, it basically takes game situation into account, right? So the Broncos have a great defense. They do have one of the best defenses in the NFL. Now, if you look on offense, though, Bills have the second best offense in the NFL based on EPA per play. So it's a battle of titans. Now, if you look at the Broncos on offense, they're 18th in the NFL in EPA per play. So it's pretty well balanced between the Bills offense, as far as EPA is concerned, to the Broncos defense and vice versa.
I have a question for you. The Broncos schedule What teams have they beaten? What teams have they lost to?
I know.
Because the Bills lost the 3 losses, not counting the last game, were to playoff teams, right? Rams,
Yes. Yep.
Ravens, and Texans. And the Texans and Ravens, those are really early games. And really the only ugly loss of the whole season was to the Ravens. Like the Texans and the Rams, I mean, they probably should beat them. Probably should only have 1 loss.
So let's see. Let's go over this real quick. They lost to the Seahawks. They lost to the Steelers. They won against the Buccaneers, which looking back, that's a pretty good win considering how the Buccaneers have been playing. They won against the Jets barely, 10-9. They won against the Raiders. They lost to the Chargers. They won against the Saints. They won against the Panthers. They lost 41-10 against the Ravens. So, they lost to the Chiefs 16-14. So barely lost to the Chiefs. They beat the Falcons 38-6. They beat the Raiders 29-19. They beat the Browns 41-32. They beat the Colts 31-13. They lost to the Chargers 27-34. They lost to the Bengals 24-30, and then they beat the Chiefs 38-0. So how many of those teams are, which I'm excluding the Chiefs from week 18 because they played all their backups. How many of these are playoff teams? The Falcons are not in the playoffs, correct?
Tampa Bay won that division. Everybody else.
Tampa Bay is the only team that they beat. Yeah.
So I'm going to say Bills by like 7.
That's a good guess. The Bills are favored by 8.5 points right now, as of right now.
Okay.
When you look at that, and the over-under for that one, for the game is 47. So they're thinking, what, 20, the Bills 28, the Broncos 20. What do you think about that? Do you like that score? Do you think that's...
Seems fair.
I could see that. It's funny. The Broncos don't scare me as much as obviously the Ravens, right? The Ravens, you look at that and you're like, that looks like a tough game, right?
They scare me more than the Chiefs do, despite the stigma.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So the Bills have the second biggest point spread of the week. Baltimore actually has the first biggest point spread against the Steelers. They're favored by 9.5 points against the Steelers. That I was kind of surprised at that on Saturday night.
I'm not necessarily. The Steelers,
they dropped off a lot, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I was already picking the Ravens to win that game. So, what about the Chargers Texans? I'm thinking Chargers, right?
Yeah, the Chargers are favored by 3 points, even though it's in Houston.
So if all that goes, if all the favorites win, then it would be Buffalo against Baltimore in Buffalo, and then the Chargers in Kansas City, which actually isn't a bad game from our perspective because the Chargers and Chiefs play each other well. And then if the Ravens do beat the Bills, then they're the next best team to beat the Chiefs.
Exactly.
We do not want the Chiefs to go to 4 straight Super Bowl.
Exactly. I think the Chargers definitely have a shot at it if it goes to that. So if you're predicting what you're saying and the Chargers win and the Ravens win, then the Bills play, no matter what, the Bills play either the Steelers or the Ravens, I believe, right? No.
If the Chiefs lose, then like everything's in Buffalo. So
yeah, I meant before that, like this next week, if the Chargers win, then it's still the Chargers versus the Chiefs, like you said, and it's the Bills versus the Ravens. I think the Chargers play the Chiefs well. Plus, you have John Harbaugh as their head coach for once, so he's not going to do as many boneheaded decisions as I've seen, former Chargers head coaches make. So
now, if the Steelers somehow pull it off and they have to go to Kansas City, which is a death sentence, and then the Bills would play winner of Houston Chargers, right? They would play winner of Texans Chargers.
Yes.
In which case, we'd probably hope for Texans, I think, even though they beat us, but I think they would be easier than the Chargers at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, who do the Texans still have on offense? Is Nico Collins back? I know Stephon Diggs obviously ain't coming back anytime soon.
Dell is gone.
Della's gone. They're not the same team that the Bills barely lost to again.
Who plays first on Saturday? Baltimore Steelers or
the Chargers in Houston play first on Saturday at 4:30, and then at 8 p.m. At 8 p.m., the Ravens and the Steelers play.
I guess that makes sense that they did it that way.
I don't know. I feel confident about this Bills game. I don't know if they're going to win by, 8.5 points, but I think that everything I've been reading about the Broncos, I've been reading from their beat writers, from their SB Nation site, like they're just happy to be here, man. Like this is all. They ended the second longest playoff drought, postseason drought in the NFL this last week. I mean, that's a celebration. Sure, they'll say they're looking forward to it and they don't want it to end there, but there's a big difference between just happy to be there versus we expect to win. This is the standard. You're just in our way to get to where we want to be.
Your pick between Denver, Miami, and Cincinnati for this first game. Who would you pick?
I'm glad the Bills got Denver. I'm glad it's Bo Nix. I'm glad it's a rookie quarterback. The Bills.
What if it was Miami? What if it was Miami without Tua and Tyreek Hill is really?
I'd actually feel better if it was Tua because then because Tua's like what 0-8 when it's 40 degrees or lower. that would have been perfect. The only reason they almost beat us in the playoffs a few years ago in the wild card round was because Tua didn't start. So
yeah. I know that we have their number, but it's always in the back of my mind. You can't beat. It's harder to beat the same team 3 times a year. Either we've done it, we did it last year, and it's like, how many times can you do that? But no, I was rooting for the Denver matchup first too. Cincinnati was my least favorite matchup.
You're right.
I didn't want to play Cincinnati, then Baltimore, and then Kansas City just to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I mean, for everything that you mentioned, I didn't want to play the Bengals as they were starting to get hot, at the end of the season. You don't want to play a team that's just all of a sudden on fire and has nothing to lose or feels like they have nothing to lose. Like you said, playing the Dolphins 3 times in a year and beating them is tough, is very tough to do, especially because, the Dolphins bring an extra, they'll bring an extra bit of oomph knowing that they're playing the Bills and they don't like the Bills.
You could say that about Denver too. Like they got nothing to lose. So they're going to go all out on this game.
Yeah, but they're not as familiar with the Buffalo Bills. And I think that they don't have the confidence another team like the Bengals would have because the Bengals have beaten the Bills before and they have gotten far into the playoffs. They've gone to the Super Bowl recently. The Broncos are, like I said, they're just happy to be there. So they're not going to. Their goal was to get to this point. The Bills' goal this whole time has not been to get to this point. It's been to get to the Super Bowl. So they've done it the best they ever have.
The last team that beat the Bills at home?
Who? Chiefs? Denver. Oh, was it really? Oh, wow.
Or is it in the regular season, right?
That sounds right because that was the
game.
They went 10-7. I think they were 5-5 when they lost that game. Or were they 11-6 last year? They were 11-6.
So last year in the playoffs, did they play the Chiefs at home in the playoffs? Is that right?
Yes, the last regular. Yes, so I guess
so it would have been the last regular season game.
So what were you saying about Tyreek Hill? I know you wanted to bring that up.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, something about we say I'm up, bro.
It was so funny.
I didn't even realize, but like during the game, like he just didn't go back in, and like they asked McDaniels about it afterwards. And he's like, "Oh yeah, he just wasn't available," and then like they were pressing him. I mean, he gave the coach speak and a lot along the way, but it was kind of funny. It
was. I saw that today. I saw his locker room comments, and it was really funny because the reporters were giving him straight questions like you were just saying about, hey, what's going to happen with this? What are you going to do with that? And he would just gave him coach speak, like you said. And then the last question, the PR person for the Dolphins, like last question. And so the last question was so innocuous. It was like, what would you say to the guys that are preparing for next season to come back for the Dolphins or something like that? The young guys that didn't get, what's your advice to them or something like that so that they come back next season and can overcome this? Because he mentioned, he's like, this is the first season I haven't made the playoffs, something like that. And he's like, so it was like a very innocuous question like that. It wasn't, as pointed as the other ones. And he's just like, I don't know, man. I don't even know if I'm going to be here. Just this is insane. He's like, I gotta go. I'm out. Yeah, I was like, all right. You don't usually hear that often. I'm like, great. I don't mind the division rival losing their best offensive weapon. That's fine with me.
It's funny because I do like the Dolphins coach, and I just like how everything around him is just crumbling.
Wait,
the same time.
you do like the Dolphins coach, or you don't like him?
No, I like him.
Yeah,
I think
I guess
he's.
you're also enjoying this.
I think he's a decent coach, but I really loving everything that's falling apart at the same time.
I should use that meme on social media. You know, the one with the girl, the little girl swinging on the swing set, and like everything's on fire, like in the background. You know, that's like being a Bills fan in the AFC East right now. Because actually, my brother-in-law Jim texted me last night, and he kind of summed it up really well. And he said next year the Dolphins get a new coach, which I don't know if that's going to happen yet. He's like, the Jets get a new quarterback, the Patriots get a new coach. It's like the Bills are already looking good in the AFC East. Like, man, it is good to be on this side of it. And I think the Dolphins will at least fire their GM, I think, but maybe not McDaniel. We'll see. But yeah, it's kind of fun being excited going to the postseason, and then just to see the fire and ashes from the rest of the AFC East, which, not for nothing, the Bills did cause because they are so good. And when those teams can't win their division over and over again, and they can't make the playoffs because you beat them every game, yeah, it's a good place to be.
Remember during the drought where like it'd be like middle 3/4 of the way through the season, the Bills would beat a team, and that team would fire their coach at that point in the season.
Yeah, we were the litmus test, right? The barometer for if you should fire your coach.
Yeah, this year the coach won against us, and they got fired. Like, that's even better, right?
Yeah, that's hilarious. Oh my God, you guys lost to the Bills, you're fired. And here we were at like 6 or like 5-11, being like, hey, when are we gonna fire our coach? We have a worse record than that team.
Oh, we did that too every 2.5, 3 years. Like, we had our own carousel.
Oh yeah. Oh, we
and
love the coaching
coordinators and quarterbacks, and gosh.
Yeah, that's why, man, you could tell folks that have lived through the drought and haven't, because the folks that haven't, or at least don't have as good of a memory or didn't live their formative years through it like we did. I mean, we basically went through our teenage years to like our 30s almost of like terrible football, right? Like, it basically, Tom Brady and the Bills' ineptitude basically took away our early adulthood from us from enjoying Bills as fans.
What made it hurt even more was like as kids, it was Jim Kelly and those teams, Bruce Smith, Thurman Thomas, and all the like, oh, everything's great, and like, oh, they'll just go back to a 5th Super Bowl. Even in the late 90s, Doug Flutie, like, they're still, making the playoffs and this and that, and you to go from that to that, that was rough.
You know what I'm hoping? I'm hoping the Patriots go through that right now. I'm hoping that they're all those young fans go into their 30s and 40s before they're ever even slightly good. And this isn't just like the Bills being good. Like, they're better than they're finally making the playoffs. Like, they have a legit chance the last 3 or 4 seasons to make a run. They just haven't. But they're always a contender, especially this season. They weren't expected to be. We were talking about MVP, a case for Josh Allen being the MVP. How about the preseason narrative? The Bills weren't even supposed to win the division. The Ravens were definitely supposed to win their division, or at least, make the playoffs for sure. People had the Bills as like 8-9 and 9-8. Like, this is a team that's had the best season it's had, or tied for the best season in franchise history. Like, anyway, so that's about it, John. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we end this one? Because the next time you and I talk with hopefully Mike, we'll be talking about the Bills after the Denver Broncos game.
No, I think that's it. Other than, like, I was noticing on Twitter/X that there was a lot of Jets requests for head coach interviews for a lot of the offensive and defensive coordinators that are in the, like, I think it became a meme that, like, oh, they're just requesting everybody, like, including me and you, just to have an interview with.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the first ones was Joe Brady, so I think there was a lot of talk about that and possible distractions and things like that. But I'm not too concerned about that. I don't know how many, like, these. I think they're just shotgunning inquiries and see what sticks, because I think there's going to be a lot of these guys who are like, I'm going to wait until there's a team that I like, or wait till next year until there's a team that I like, because I'm in a good situation right now. Mm-hmm. And Joe Brady might be one of those guys.
Yeah, I feel like they're not going to lose Babbage or Brady this offseason yet. Babbage only because he's had one season as a defensive coordinator, and they're good, but they're not like mind-blowingly great. They're not the reason why the Bills are winning. Joe Brady on the other side, I could see happening quicker, but at the same time, I think the Bills will go deep enough into the playoffs that a lot of these teams that are replacing their head coaches are going to look for like they're not going to want to wait until after the divisional round or after the AFC Championship or NFC Championship to pick their coaches. And I think the Bills will get that far. So a lot of them just are going to get a little flustered and they're going to want to pick a guy soon as opposed to wait for a guy for later. I think the Bills make a deep run, so I don't think they lose either of them, to be honest. I think they're both kind of safe. And I think that Joe Brady's probably not the highest candidate for a head coaching gig. So I don't think any team's going to be waiting him out until the AFC Championship game or anything like that. So we'll see. We'll see. I think he's going to get it before Bobby Babbage, but
He's got a good shot at it. I just think that I don't think he's going to be desperate enough to just jump on the Jets because they offered him something. I think he would wait.
you think so? Like
Even if it's until next year, because he's in one of the best offensive coordinator situations. You got Josh Allen.
Yeah, John, but at the same time, if you're going to be a head coach, I mean, if someone offers you a head coaching gig, even if it's for the crappiest situation in the NFL, don't you take it just to take it?
You're looking at the landscape and you're like, okay, so I got the Jets this year, or I could have XYZ next year.
Man, that's tough because like you're going to make a contract, which I believe coaches are fully guaranteed contracts for the most part. I mean, he's going to be making at least $5-6 million a year, and probably a 25 to $30 million guaranteed contract. Whereas right now, what's the most he's making as a coordinator for the Bills? Maybe 1 million, probably more like 600,000 or 700,000.
You look at an organization like the Jets and how many coaches flame out, or you could be the next Tomlin or McDermott or Jeff Fisher. I mean, Marty Schottenheimer, like anybody, right? Like who had longevity because they were good. They stuck on with a good team also.
Hey, it would be a smart move to do it that way. I just don't know if the Bills are going to be able to wait, or if Brady's going to.
The Jets are the worst. Like
Joe Brady makes 1.8. Go ahead.
I mean, Ken Dorsey went to Cleveland. He had to go because he was fired, so like he had to pick a team. Cleveland's probably the next worst team. Jacksonville is right on the same line as Cleveland as far as
Joe Brady is making an estimated $1.8 million this year, and
that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. That's more than I make.
No, stop, John. And Todd Monken, the Ravens offensive coordinator, is making $3 million a year. So he's the highest paid estimated. So yeah, I guess it's not as big of Ken Dorsey, by the way, real quick, was at 2.3 million this last year for the Browns, which is crazy that he's making more than Joe Brady, but I guess I kind of get it.
Well, I guess Joe Brady is his first year too, right? First full
season, yeah. But yeah, so I guess it's not that big of a difference to go from 1.8 million to 5 or 6 million. I mean, it is 3 times the amount easily, but at the same time, you wait a year, then all of a sudden you
also have to think your longevity, right? Like how dysfunctional is that organization? Yeah, you have to weigh that in. Like if you want to bet on yourself, wait for a better opportunity, I guess.
Yeah, agreed. All right, John, this has been a lot of fun talking the Bills-Patriots game. The Buffalo Bills heading to Orchard Park to play the Denver Broncos there. Broncos traveling across country. Mind you, it's not like a crazy to Buffalo because the Broncos had the similar weather than the Bills have, but they're also coming off a high from winning 38-0. So are they going to be as hungry? You know, I was listening to a podcast, Chris Brown and Eric Wood, and they were talking about maybe that punch in the face that the Bills got from losing to the Rams when they did was what they needed at the time. And thinking, hey, maybe we need to make a few changes, not just go into the postseason or the end of the regular season thinking we can just get away with whatever they were doing. So, yeah, we hit on that. We hit on AFC East drama. And, yeah. So, everyone, thank you guys all for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, get in there. We're going to do another giveaway for the Bills-Broncos playoff review recap that we do every week and from there. So signing off for John.
This would you rather be than right here, right now.
And for me, Nate, this is the only place I want to be, is right here in the playoffs with all of you guys and you, John, specifically. Go Bills, and we'll talk to you guys again next week.
Thank you for listening to the Circling the Wagons podcast. Download and subscribe to us in your favorite podcast service. Email us at ctpod@gmail.com. That's Charlie Tango Whiskey Pod@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at CTWPod. And most importantly, go Bills!
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, Nate.
Well, listen, the whole show is called Circling